Hello, everyone, and welcome to Film Etc., the only movie review podcast you need in life. My name is Mike Webb. I'll be your host, and I'm back. The whole show is back. I can't wait to be back in the world of podcasting. I had to put the show on hiatus because I was feeling ill the past couple of weeks, but I'm back in better health and I'm excited to be back. But I was originally going to come back with a big episode of reviews of movies that I've seen since the last episode, but unfortunately, due to scheduling, that is unfortunately not going to happen. So for this week, I'm down to a twofer once again. And if you guys are new to the show, I basically review the new releases of the week and grade them on a scale from 0 to 10. So for this week, we have reviews of the latest Clint Eastwood drama called CRY MACHO and a biopic called The EYES of Tammy Faye starring Jessica Chastain and Andrew Garfield. So without further ado, let's get started. Just to give you all a bit of a heads up, a warning if you would call it that, and if you guys are new to the show, I am autistic. I have been diagnosed with high functioning autism since I was 4 years old. So you may hear my wording a bit off when I'm reviewing these movies. So I hope you all forgive me. But other than that, I hope you enjoyed this week's episode. CRY MACHO is the 39th directorial effort from legendary actor Clint Eastwood. This year marks his 50th year of directing movies, starting all the way back in 1971, where he made his directorial debut with the film Play Misty for Me. He has since gone on to direct two movies to win the Oscar for Best Picture, 1992's Unforgiven and 2004's $1 Million Baby, for which he also won Best Director for both films. Based on the book of the same name by N. Richard Nash, Eastwood stars as Mike Milo, a one-time rodeo star and washed-up breeder who, in 1980, takes a job from an ex-boss to bring the man's young son home and away from his alcoholic, abusive mother. Crossing rural Mexico on their way back to Texas, the unlikely pair faces an unexpectedly challenging journey, during which the world-weary horseman may find his own sense of redemption through teaching the boy what it means to be a good man. The film also stars Dwight Yoakam as Howard, the ex-boss, and Eduardo Minette as Raphael, the boy Eastwood's character picks up, as well as Natalia Traven and Fernanda Urejola. Now, in case if you're new to the movie watching world, which I doubt it, and you don't know who Eastwood is, which is kind of silly. I mean, everybody knows who Clint Eastwood is, but in case you don't, Eastwood is a legend. He's been best known for playing cowboys in like the late 50s to like 60s, 70s, 80s. You get the idea. He's known for playing cowboys like The Man with No Name and the famous Man with No Name trilogy by Sergio Leone, the films Fistful of Dollars, For a Few Dollars More, and the most iconic of them all, The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. He's also played cowboys in movies like The Outlaw Josie Wales and Pale Rider and Hang 'em High, and he even played a singing cowboy in a musical called Paint Your Wagon. But yeah, and he also does some interesting work. He also does movies like In the Line of Fire and Space Cowboys, and he's also known for the Dirty Harry movies. I've seen very few of movies that he's directed. I mean, I like movies like Invictus, which is his rugby movie, and $1 Million Baby. They're both really good sports movies, I will say that. Solely with Tom Hanks is fine. American Sniper and Richard Jewell are very awards baity. And then movies like J. Edgar, Hereafter, and 1517 to Paris were just not good. And usually as a director, Eastwood is like best known for just like using very few takes as possible, get like 2-3 takes in and then just like move on. And so this film was in development since the 1970s. The author of the book, N. Richard Nash, who does have a co-writing screenplay credit, even though he passed away in 2000, he originally was writing this story as a screenplay, but it was rejected twice, and then he just used that material and wrote it as a novel. And Eastwood was first approached by this role by producer Albert S. Ruddy all the way back in 1988. He was like, I'm not that old yet. And so this film has been in development numerous times. They were getting actors like Roy Scheider and Robert Mitchum, and they were even gonna this close of doing it with Arnold Schwarzenegger. And but his divorce with Maria Shriver, ultimately that project just fell through. And then they approached Eastwood again, and we're just like, okay, I'll do it. And I had very low expectations going into this movie, and by the end, it was somewhat better than I would thought it was going to be, because I'm very hit or miss with movies directed by Clint Eastwood overall. I found the first 45 minutes to be extremely dull and boring. We're just like the first 10 minutes, and we're just like setting up exposition and what Eastwood's character was, and how Dwight Yoakam is trying to tell him that he needs to go to Mexico and get his son out of there, so just so that he could like live with him. The reason why Dwight Yoakam can't do it is he has legal issues for just like reasons that are like never explained and all that stuff. So he crosses the border to Mexico and then finds the house of the ex-wife, who's just demanding and just like kind of spoiled, I want to say. She's just a very uninteresting character. And the reason why this movie is called Cry Macho is that the kid has a pet chicken and he uses that chicken in cockfighting, but there's very little cockfighting in this movie. But yeah, it's really interesting. You think a movie like Cry Macho and it's a dumb title. But there's actually like a little bit of sense to it, but it's also like about machismo and like what it means to be a man and all that stuff. But like after the first 45 minutes, like after you hear about like the 13-year-old kid and like whether or not he wants to go to the US just to be with his dad because he like owns cattle and horses and all that stuff. And then you find out like the reasons why the mother is like very abusive. And all of a sudden the story gets somewhat interesting along the way, because they just like are just like stuck in a small town, and they're like visited by this woman who owns a diner, and she and Clint Eastwood, she and Clint Eastwood's character are forming this like somewhat of a bond, I would say. She has like grandchildren, and like one of them is deaf, and Clint Eastwood just like knows how to like sign or something like that, use sign language, I would say. They also like just like rest at this like local church, and the kid is like, we don't want to be sleeping next to the Mother Mary, and they're just like and then Eastwood's like, I don't care and all that stuff. But there's also a point where he's where Eastwood's character is like teaching the boy like how to ride a horse, and there's like one point in the movie where you see Eastwood like trying to ride a horse as well, but then you see like his stunt double in like the next shot, and I don't know if it's like green screen or anything, but E- Eastwood just like does not care what he wants to do in life. But yeah, Eastwood is like 91 years old, and usually if you're a person like this, you would just be retired and just like live out the rest of your days until your time is up. But yeah, the acting is just probably like from subpar to just all right. Like Eastwood's all right in this, the kid's all right in this. Dwight Yoakam is just playing a character that is just giving exposition to Clint Eastwood's character for the entire movie. And the pacing of this, it's like mixed. Sometimes it's just fast, and sometimes it's just dragging and stuff. The last 10 minutes, especially, it just like wants to quickly wrap things up. There's like uh, kind of like a guy that the abusive mother is like uh asking them to like track them down, and just like like she wants the kid back and all that stuff. But yeah, I mean, this movie overall, I'm very mixed on this. But in fact, a lot of people were thinking me this could be Clint Eastwood's swan song. We don't really know if this is his last movie. This isn't his fair. We don't know if this is his farewell or not. It could be his farewell for an. It could be his farewell as an actor, but we don't know if he's still going to direct more movies. I mean, he's going to be churning out movies until the day he's passed on from this earth. That's what we said when we thought Gran Torino would be his last, and then Trouble with the Curve would be his last, and then The Mule, and now we have this. But if this is truly Eastwood's last movie, whether as an actor or a director, then I will say hats off to you. But yeah, anyway, those are my thoughts on Cry Macho, and now let's get to my thoughts on The Eyes of Tammy Faye. The Eyes of Tammy Faye is the fifth feature film from director Michael Showalter and is adapted from the documentary of the same name from 2000. In the 1970s and 80s, Tammy Faye and Jim Bakker, played by Jessica Chastain and Andrew Garfield, rose from humble beginnings to create the world's largest religious broadcasting network and theme park, and were revered for their message of love, acceptance, and prosperity. The film also stars Cherry Jones, Mark Wistracht, and Vincent D'Onofrio. Now, first thing off the bat, I had no idea who these people were. I knew that televangelism was a big thing in the 80s. I'm a fan of the Genesis song, Jesus, He Knows Me. If you don't know who Genesis is, it's the band that is Phil Collins is the lead singer. They're currently on their reunion tour right now. But that song and the music video itself is just like a satire on televangelism. The film the film plays out like a normal by the numbers biopic, The Eyes of Tammy Faye. I've never seen the documentary, but from what I've heard is that it leaves out some of the things that are not fully explored in the dramatized version. And now I would find Tammy Faye uh, to be somewhat an odd character. Like she wears expensive clothes. She's just like in full makeup all the time. It she has this like odd personality, and yet she is interesting. Jessica Chastain is playing it. She's just like in full prosthetic makeup throughout, and this movie is easily gonna get make it. This movie is easily going to get a makeup nomination come awards time. I like how Tammy Faye is just a person that just feels open to the world around her, but she also feels this like sense of innocence going on. If you're going to see this movie alone, it's for Chastain. She is giving it her all. She is giving like this little squeaky voice like this, just like, how are you doing today and all that stuff. And she just like laughs inadvertently here and there. This movie is all centered around her point of view. Andrew Garfield, he's all right as Jim Bakker, but I I didn't know too much about, again, I didn't know too much about these people going in, but Jim Bakker, unfortunately, he is kind of like a uh it I mean, as a character, I didn't mind him much, but it when I learned about what he actually done, where he was like convicted of sexual misconduct and fraud and embezzlement, he just felt like a horrible human being, I would say, but not as horrible as Vincent D'Onofrio plays Jerry Falwell Sr., who's a Southern Baptist and a very conservative activist who's like very concerned about the Baker show and wealth and all that stuff. He's just like playing the worst human being imaginable in this movie. I think the best character in the entire movie is actually Tammy Faye's mother, played by an actress named Cherry Jones. She is just like teaching Tammy Faye like what is right and what is not right about religious and stuff like that. Like this is a movie that spans around 40 years of Tammy Faye's life, from like the early 50s to like 1994, and you get to see Cherry Jones, Tammy Faye, playing Tammy Faye's mother. She's just like playing the piano and like the early scenes, and just like giving Tammy Faye advice throughout the whole movie and stuff. Again, this is a really interesting movie, but I don't think it works 100%. I didn't hate it. I didn't think it was terrible in any way, shape, or form, but again, it plays out like a standard typical biopic where you see the subject like later in life at the very beginning, and then it all of a sudden it just like cuts flashbacks to an earlier time in life, and then how she rose from there, how she met Jim Baker at a Bible college, and then they see Pat Robinson on television preaching, and they ended up getting their own show on the Christian Broadcasting Network. And their show, what they pulled the plug on the show and instead launched the 700 Club with Pat Robinson, where I believe it's still going on today. And then they start their own television network called Praise the Lord, or PTL as it stood for. And then they had it just became like kind of like a Christian themed like CNN, where it's just like daily like word of mouth sermons and preaching and all that stuff. They even like put like programs that don't even have to do religion, just like decorating frosting on cupcakes and all that stuff. And yeah, it I mean I get I knew how, like, even though I didn't grow up in that era, I think televangelism is kind of a gimmick, I would say. I just think the whole story revolving around Tammy Faye and Jim Baker is just really interesting, I would say. I mean, they were making a lot of money, but yet they weren't paying their taxes. They just were just like filled with wealth, and they just wanted like whatever. Just like Tammy Faye Baker just like wanted to pick a lot of like fur coats, even with like her mother for her to try on. And they wanted to develop the Heritage USA Christian theme park, and yeah, and Tammy Faye was really interested in singing, and she wanted to put out an album, and then she has a relationship with a music producer. I mean, both of them kind of cheated, although the one with Jim Bakker is just like very like it they don't touch upon it enough. I will say that. It's oddly funny too. It like Tammy Faye is like addicted to Diet Coke through this movie, and it's also sad as well because Tammy Faye is also addicted to and drugs. I can't remember what drug it is, but it starts with an A. But there was like one scene in the movie where she just like ODs while like on live television and stuff like that. Some people have compared this movie to the Tanya Harding biopic starring Margot Robbie called I, Tanya, which I haven't seen, but I've heard in both films they treat the character like they're a joke, the main character like a joke. Like there's a like I believe in both movies there's like a montage that had just has people making fun of that person in general. Like in this movie, you see like a little brief bit of someone on Saturday Night Live during the church lady segment with Dana Carvey, and you see an actress just like she had like mascara just like running down her face and makeup, and just yeah, I think that's like what Tammy Faye is like somewhat known for. She just like cried on air like one time, and then all of a sudden the makeup just like ran down. But yeah, again, there are some things that in this movie that are just very briefly touched upon. Again, like Jim's relationship with another woman. There's also a little brief hint about homosexuality. Again, like Jessica Chastain is just like open to the idea of like the world around her. They were interviewing a man with AIDS on the show, and Vincent D'Onofrio's character is just not having it. And but yeah, I this the it is the screenplay is written by Abe Sylvia, who is an openly gay man, and I think I'm kind of proud of him because I'm a man who's just like open to the idea of people who are gay, people who are transgender, just the world around them, pansexual even. But yeah, I I mean again, I didn't hate this movie. I just thought it was very interesting overall. Like I think it's a fine movie in general. I'll probably watch the documentary one day just to get the whole idea about who these people were in general. But but yeah, again, and in real life, Jim Bakker, he was sentenced to jail for about 45 years, but they like lowered the prison sentence to like 15, and he's now out, and I believe he's still currently doing a show somewhere, but I don't know. Tammy Faye Bakker is no longer with us. She passed away in 2007. Well, she did get remarried in the 90s, and but she passed away in 2007 after an 11-year battle with colon cancer. But yeah, those are my thoughts on The Eyes of Tammy Faye. It is currently playing in select theaters and will expand on Friday. And now let's get to our review roundup and call it a day. All right, guys, in case you are new to the review roundup, or if you need a little bit of refresher, this is how I grade my movies. I grade them on a scale from a 0 to a 10. If I give a movie somewhere between an 8 to a 10, that is a high recommendation. I recommend it. It's probably one of the best movies of the year. You should see it. If I give a movie somewhere between a 7 to a 7.9, still a good recommendation, just not as high as I wanted it to be. Somewhere between a 6 to a 6.9. It's all right. Okay, fine, I guess. And then somewhere between 5 to a 5.9, and just like average, middle of the road, whatever. And then if I give a movie under a 4.9 or under, then I would just not bother whatsoever. Probably that. It could be the worst movie ever made, but who knows? So on that scale, I'm going to give The Eyes of Tammy Faye a 6.5 out of 10. Again, I think the performances from Jessica Chastain and Andrew Garfield are really strong enough. I mean, Chastain, this is all especially her movie. I just wish it wasn't played out like a normal biopic, in my personal opinion. But yeah, and CRY MACHO, which is currently available on HBO Max for a month, but is also playing in theaters. I'm going to flip flop my number and give it a 5.6 out of 10. I mean, I don't know if this will be Eastwood's last movie overall in general, but don't hold your hopes up if it is. But anyway, guys, that's it for the review roundup this week. And now let's end the show and call it a day. Well, guys, that does it for this week's episode of Film Etc. I am so happy to be back doing this podcast for you all. I failed to mention this at the top of the show, but we are in autumn now. We are currently in the middle of the fall film festival circuit. We just had Venice, Telluride, and Toronto, and currently ongoing right now, we have the New York Film Festival. But the reason why I brought this up is that you're going to hear word of mouth from potential movies that are coming out later, like end of the year, that are going to be like pushed for like awards and stuff like that. But anyway, guys, you can subscribe and follow the show on the many places that we stream, including Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, you name it. Please leave a 5-star review on our Apple Podcast page. That way the show can climb up to the top of the charts. Tell your friends, spread the word of mouth about it. I'll be back next week with more movie reviews, including the highly anticipated musical, if you want to call it that, called Dear Evan Hansen. It's by the songwriters who did La La Land and Greatest Showman, and I've seen it and I have some thoughts, but you're gonna have to wait till next week to find out. But anyway, guys, you can follow me on social media on Twitter, Instagram, and Letterboxd at RealMikeWebb. You can also follow the show on Instagram at FilmETCcast. Thanks again for listening. Stay safe, wash your hands, and until next time, I will see you all at the cinema.